Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I never imagined my wife was leading a hidden double life. Not until I stumbled across something that shattered my entire understanding of our relationship. Instead of reacting rashly or immediately confronting her, I chose to take a more methodical approach. She probably thought her secrets were well hidden beyond my reach, but I soon proved her very wrong. Her most recent meeting? Let's just say it'll leave a lasting impression, one that might even be the final chapter in their sordid little affair. It all started with something small, a dash of mischief, literally. I figured a playful prank could set the stage for what was to come, so I added a bit of chili powder to the mix. That was only the appetizer, though. The real spectacle awaited them outside, in the parking lot. They thought they'd slip away unnoticed, but when they got into the car, they found themselves face to face with an unforgettable surprise. But let me rewind a bit and explain how everything unfolded. My wife, Susan, works as a real estate agent. Her job regularly takes her out of town for property showings, promotional videos, and listing photos. That's part of the routine. I, on the other hand, work from home as a mobile app developer, and our lives had settled into a predictable rhythm. At least, I thought they had, until one afternoon shattered that illusion. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I accidentally cut my finger. It was a minor injury, but I needed a bandage. After checking all the usual places and coming up empty, I figured Susan might have one in her travel bag. That's when everything started to fall apart. Her bag sat there, forgotten in the corner. Curiosity got the best of me, and I opened it up. There, hidden in a side pocket, was a stash of condoms, brand name ones to be specific. We hadn't used condoms in years. That was my first red flag. My heart skipped a beat as I stood there, staring at the undeniable proof. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Susan's work trips weren't the only thing occupying her time. She was living a double life, and I'd been blind to it all this time. A wave of betrayal and humiliation swept over me. I had been the loyal husband, supporting her career, managing things at home, loving her without reservation, only to discover that she had been deceiving me. The hurt quickly morphed into anger. I couldn't just let it go, but I wasn't about to lash out recklessly either. If she thought she could pull this off without consequences, she was gravely mistaken. I chose to stay calm and plan my next steps carefully. My first priority was gathering more evidence. But as I plotted, another thought occurred to me. What if I could make her little rendezvous a lot less enjoyable? I grabbed the condoms and headed to the kitchen, where I mixed a potent concoction of olive oil and ground chili pepper. After testing the blend, trust me, it burned, I filled a syringe and carefully injected the mixture into each condom. To cover my tracks, I sealed the tiny punctures with a drop of glue. The whole process felt like something out of my childhood, when I'd create intricate projects with precision and creativity. It was almost ironic that those same skills would come into play in such a twisted way. Once I was satisfied with my work, I replaced the condoms and took a moment to appreciate the first step in my plan. Then, I turned to technology. If I was going to confront Susan, I needed to know everything. That evening, while she took her usual long bath, I installed a spy app on her phone. Within minutes, I had access to her texts, calls, emails, and even her location. I could now monitor her every move, an unseen presence tracking her secret life. When Susan returned home that night, everything seemed normal. She went about her usual routine, unaware that I had uncovered her hidden world. I played my part flawlessly, smiling and acting as though nothing had changed. After dinner, she retreated to her bath, her favorite escape with candles and soft music, giving me all the time I needed to put the next phase of my plan into motion. With her phone back in place and the app running smoothly, a strange calm settled over me. I had the evidence, the tools, and the patience to see this through. Susan had no idea what was waiting for her. As she emerged from her bath, serene and completely oblivious, I casually mentioned that I'd be working late on a project. The truth was, the real project had already begun. I had become a secret intruder in her world, rifling through her phone, uncovering messages and conversations she assumed were safe from my eyes. That's when I found Derek. He was younger than me, likely in his mid-20s, and their exchanges were a slap in the face. It wasn't just the betrayal of the affair itself, but the sheer audacity of their conversations. Under the guise of work trips, they had been meeting in seedy motels, dining together, and indulging in their sordid affair without a care. But the worst part wasn't even their secret meetings. It was the disgusting, vile messages they exchanged that made my stomach churn. Their connection went beyond the physical. It was soaked in something far darker and more depraved. The details she shared about their encounters were revolting. Images I couldn't erase from my mind, words that made my skin crawl. She spoke openly about things I never imagined she was capable of, her language so repulsive it made me physically ill. This was not the woman I had married. How could she lie so easily, live such a twisted double life right under my nose? For a moment, I questioned whether my plan might be too extreme. But as I sifted through more of their messages, my initial thoughts of restraint vanished. No, my plan needed to be harsher. They needed to pay in a way that would leave a lasting impression. The next morning, Susan left for work with her usual smile, her routine unbroken. I sat at my desk, eyes glued to the phone, digging deeper into her web of deceit. Her messages were casual, breezy, work-related exchanges with colleagues, clients, and of course, Derek. And yet, there was something chilling about the way they spoke to each other, as though their betrayal wasn't even worth acknowledging. She was already making plans for their next motel rendezvous, as though I were a fool who would never suspect a thing, a trusting husband none the wiser. She had no clue I was tracking her every move. Her arrogance was astounding, her belief that I was completely oblivious, that I could never catch on. The more I saw, the more my anger grew, and the more my resolve solidified. If they wanted to wallow in filth, I would make sure they got more than they bargained for. I wasn't just going to expose their affair, I was going to make them suffer for it. And I had the perfect plan. My neighbor Tom worked in septic services, handling waste management. It wasn't glamorous, but it was exactly what I needed. One evening I approached him with a strange request. "Hey Tom," I said, keeping my tone light. "I need your help with something a little unusual." Tom raised an eyebrow. "What kind of help are we talking about?" "Well," I hesitated. "I need a couple of canisters of waste. You know, the kind you deal with." He stared at me, wide-eyed. "Sewage? Are you serious? What for?" Caught off guard, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "Research," I said quickly. "I'm working on something experimental." It was a ridiculous excuse, but Tom didn't question me further. He just chuckled and shook his head. "You're a piece of work," he muttered. But the next day, he delivered exactly what I needed. 2 large canisters filled with the most foul-smelling, revolting liquid imaginable. "Here you go," he said, still shaking his head. "Whatever it is you're doing, I don't want to know." I didn't care about his judgment or the disgust in his eyes. I had what I needed, and I was ready to execute my plan. I wasn't going to let them get away with this, not without paying a price. My plan was simple. Follow Susan and Derek to their motel, wait until they were deep in their betrayal, and then cover both of their cars with the disgusting concoction. If they wanted to play dirty, I was about to show them the dirtiest game imaginable. The thought of them strutting out of the motel, smug and self-satisfied, only to find their cars drenched in waste, gave me a sense of satisfaction. But what I didn't know was that fate was about to take my revenge even further than I had planned. When Susan told me about her upcoming business trip, I acted nonchalant. I smiled, wished her well, and watched her pack as if everything was fine. But thanks to the spy app on her phone, I knew exactly where she was headed. That evening, I loaded the canisters into my car and followed her, tracking her movements with the GPS I'd secretly installed on her phone. I kept my distance, but stayed close enough to monitor her every turn. Susan parked her car far from the motel, trying to be discreet. It was a clever move, but not clever enough. Derek's car, on the other hand, was parked boldly in front of the motel, as if he had nothing to fear. He leaned against it with the cocky air of someone who thought they were untouchable. When Susan approached, they embraced like giddy teenagers, lost in their own world. The sight of them together made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. My time would come. Once they disappeared inside, I sprang into action. I grabbed the canisters and moved quietly toward Derek's car, the night working in my favor. No one was around, no cameras, no distractions. At first, my plan was simple. Douse Derek's car with the sewage, then move on to Susan's. But as I approached, I saw a golden opportunity. Derek had left 2 of his windows cracked open. Whether out of carelessness or overconfidence, I didn't care. It was perfect. I slipped my hand through the small gap in the window, moving with excruciating care to avoid making a sound. The moment of reckoning was at hand, and everything was falling into place. After a tense and difficult struggle, I finally managed to lower the car window just enough to slip through my plan. The simplicity of the action struck me as oddly profound. With a self-satisfied grin, I twisted open the first canister, watching its foul contents spill out in thick, viscous streams over the driver's seat. The stench hit me immediately, overwhelming in its potency, an assault on my senses that made my stomach churn and my throat tighten. It was the sort of smell that clung to everything, stubborn and unshakable. But I forced myself to push through. Derek had earned this. I imagined him coming back to his car after a cozy evening with Susan, blissfully unaware of the nightmare waiting for him inside. The idea of him stepping into that car and being hit by the most putrid odor imaginable brought a twisted sense of satisfaction. It was exactly what he deserved. As the last of the sludge oozed out, the smell intensified to a nearly unbearable level. I had to step back, biting down hard to keep from retching myself. Susan's car, however, would remain untouched. Derek's was all I needed. There was still 1 more canister, and I moved to the passenger side to continue my work. The window was cracked just enough for me to repeat the process. This time, the liquid splashed even more as it soaked deep into the upholstery. The stench spread like wildfire, a nauseating miasma that could break the strongest of stomachs. My own body rebelled, and I barely made it to the bushes before I lost my composure. The revolting nature of it all was almost too much to bear, but I reassured myself it was all worth it. When I finally caught my breath, I made my way back to my own car, my hands still trembling from the ordeal, the disgusting odor clinging to me like a second skin. I grabbed a water bottle, trying to wash away the taste of bile from my mouth, but the stench lingered, relentless and mocking. Taking a deep breath, I focused on the reason behind this madness. They both deserved every ounce of this misery. Every foul drop of that sludge was retribution, pure and simple. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming. I opened my laptop, connected to the surveillance app, and settled in to watch as the events unfolded. Susan's phone, left on the nightstand, served as my window into their world. The muffled sounds of their voices, soft and carefree, filled my ears, laughing together, completely oblivious to what was about to disrupt their idyllic night. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I stayed focused. The real show was just beginning, and I wasn't about to miss a second of it. I waited patiently, knowing their calm and intimate moments were about to shatter into chaos. As their conversation continued, I felt a brief flicker of regret. Perhaps I should have ruined Susan's car as well. Derek's would certainly be enough, but both of them? That would have been even more fitting. Yet it was too late for second guesses. The satisfaction would come soon enough. The change in their mood was subtle at first, just a hint of unease, barely noticeable. But soon, the muffled giggles turned into uneasy murmurs, which quickly escalated into panicked groans. Derek's voice broke through, strained and desperate. "Something's wrong, it's burning down there." Susan responded with equal discomfort, her voice tinged with panic. "Yeah, I feel it too. Something's off." There was a sharp pause, followed by a gasp of realization. "Oh God, it's burning. What's happening?" And then all hell broke loose. Derek's voice was filled with panic. "It feels like fire. What's going on?" Susan's cries of alarm were raw and terrified, her words shaky with the shock of the pain. They scrambled frantically for a solution, dousing themselves with water in a futile attempt to ease the searing agony. But anyone who knew anything about chili peppers understood that water would only make things worse. The muffled laughter they'd shared moments before had turned into frantic yelps and cries of pain. I couldn't help but savor the irony. The disaster was unfolding exactly as I had hoped, perhaps even better. Their panic grew by the second as they struggled to find some relief. "We need to go to the hospital!" Susan's voice was shrill with fear. Derek didn't hesitate, quickly yanking on his clothes as they both rushed to leave, half running, half limping, in a frantic attempt to escape the burning sensation that seemed to have taken over their bodies. They moved like puppets, limbs jerking uncontrollably as the pain twisted them in a desperate, agonizing dance. When they finally reached Derek's car, they didn't pause to think. Without a second thought, they threw open the door and jumped inside, oblivious to the hellish stench that awaited them. The moment they settled into the seats, the screaming began. "What the hell is this?" Derek's voice cracked with disbelief. Susan's horrified shriek pierced the air. "Oh my God, it's everywhere!" The filth had soaked through their clothes, clinging to them in thick, revolting patches. Their cries turned into violent gagging as they scrambled to escape the wreckage, shaking off the foul mess in a panic. Derek hopped around in disgust, yelling, "It's in my shoes!" while Susan, her voice cracking, echoed his revulsion. Their romantic night had devolved into a grotesque nightmare of searing pain and vile filth. As they floundered around in the parking lot, retching and howling in horror, I leaned back, unable to contain my amusement. The scene before me was pure chaos, a fitting punishment for both of them. And for me, it was nothing short of perfect. The odor hit her like a physical force, overpowering, suffocating, and utterly revolting. It was a stench of rot, a nauseating blend that made her gag uncontrollably. She staggered backward, clutching her stomach as her body fought the urge to vomit right there in the parking lot. "This is disgusting," she muttered, her voice quivering with a mix of disbelief and revulsion. For a moment, they stood frozen, drenched in filth, retching and cursing, unsure of what to do next. What had been meant as a romantic evening had descended into a grotesque nightmare. Instead of intimacy, they were now covered in muck, their skin burning with irritation and the stench of decay clinging to them like a permanent mark. From my vantage point, I struggled to suppress the urge to laugh. The sight of their panic was almost comical. In their frantic state, they made the most absurd decision possible. They bolted for Susan's car. The sound of their clothes squelching with every step, leaving behind a trail of filth, was almost too much to bear. I could only imagine the phone call Susan would have to make to a car detailer later. "Hi, can you clean my car? It's contaminated." But at that moment, neither of them cared about the state of her vehicle. All they cared about was reaching the hospital. They clambered into Susan's car, abandoning Derek's mess in the parking lot, and sped away, leaving behind a grimy streak of sewage on the asphalt. I leaned back in my seat, watching their hasty retreat, their voices fading into the distance. This had turned out better than I could have hoped. They wanted to play dirty? They'd just had the filthiest night of their lives. As I drove home, I couldn't contain my amusement. Through the Spy app, I could still hear their frantic voices. Their words were a garbled mix of groans, curses, and desperate cries as they sped toward the hospital. Every bump in the road must have felt like torture, their bodies still racked with the after-effects of the chili peppers and the revolting smell of sewage clinging to them. Derek's voice cracked as he yelled, "What kind of insane allergic reaction is this?" "I don't know," Susan screamed, equally frantic. "Why is it burning so much? What the hell was in that car? Oh God, I'm going to throw up!" They spent the entire ride alternating between screaming in agony and dry heaving, wildly speculating on what could possibly have caused their suffering. By the time they reached the hospital, the chaos was far from over. They burst into the emergency room, filthy and frantic, triggering horrified reactions from the staff. "What in the world is that smell?" a nurse exclaimed, recoiling in shock. "Is this some kind of biohazard situation?" "We need help, now!" Derek rasped, struggling to stay upright. My My groin is on fire! One nurse, clearly fighting the urge to gag, approached them cautiously. Can you explain what happened? We don't know, Susan cried, tears streaming down her face. Something burned us. We need to be cleaned. Please, help us. The hospital staff exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to treat them or call for a hazmat team. Eventually, a doctor, his face covered by a mask, stepped forward and directed them to the decontamination showers. We'll need to figure out what's causing this burning sensation, he muttered, though even he had to pause and gag. But first, good Lord, that smell. It was utter pandemonium. Between the couple's frantic cries for help and the staff scrambling to avoid the stench, it was better than any comedy I'd ever seen. I laughed so hard I had to pull over on my drive home. By the time I got back to my place, the adrenaline of the night began to settle into a calm but resolute determination. This was no longer just about getting back at them. This was about ending a sham of a marriage. I sat down at my computer and started researching divorce attorneys. By the following morning, I had scheduled a meeting with one of the best in town. Just before bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Susan. Something came up on my business trip. I'll be delayed, it said. I smirked, knowing exactly what had come up. She wasn't coming back anytime soon, not with her body still stinging from the previous night's events. The next day, while Susan nursed her physical and emotional wounds, I met with my lawyer. The divorce papers were drawn up swiftly, and just a few days later they were ready. I only needed to wait for her return. When she finally walked through the door, she looked utterly defeated, exhausted, bitter, and entirely broken. The fire that had once burned in her eyes was replaced by frustration and weariness. How was the business trip? I asked casually, leaning against the counter. Her face twisted in irritation. Awful, she replied, clearly hoping to change the subject. Well, I said, pulling the divorce papers from the drawer, it's about to get worse. I handed them to her. I can't live with a cheater, I stated, my voice cold and firm. Her face went pale with shock. What? What are you talking about? I know everything, Susan, I said, my tone calm but resolute. Derek, the motel, every single detail. She stammered, trying to explain herself. It's not what you think. It's just... And then it hit her. Her expression changed as the realization set in. She connected the dots, the chili oil, the sewage, the timing of the divorce papers, and her face hardened with rage. You did this? She snarled. You sabotaged us, you sick... Before she could finish, she lunged at me, fists flailing. You ruined everything! I stepped back, laughing. No, Susan, you ruined everything. You made your choice. Over the next few months, the divorce proceedings were predictably contentious. She fought tooth and nail over every insignificant detail, but in the end, the victory was mine. I'll never forget her expression during property division when I casually remarked, "Oh, by the way, Susan, I don't want any claim on your car." Her face went crimson, the memory of that night still raw in her mind. It was a small victory, but it was a sweet one. In the end, she had sealed her own fate, and I walked away, free from her lies and betrayal, knowing I had exacted my own brand of poetic justice. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.